and she would do all kinds of services, cook and all kinds of things. She moved here for like 6 months or more, but she just couldn't afford to live here and left. Went to Alachua. You probably never met her. Yeah, it's expensive to live around here outside the temple.
Yeah. She's good to give our devotional service. It's difficult to maintain.
There's within the pause.
Anyway, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
How I know a lot of them is because on Thursdays I used to help in the kitchen. Oh, wow. To cook. It was not to stay, but it was too late to me. So I did it for like a year. A little bit more than a year. And so I got to know the distance, always coming in and out. Got to know what I'm supposed to do. And I was thinking, really?
Oh, where's the big crowd?
We are the big crowd.
The big crowd.
We are the big crowd. See how large we are?
Today is our fast day. Today is the fast. It's actually Mahavashi, but it's the day some days. Ekadashi, because of the way the sun rises, you don't celebrate it on Ekadashi, but the next day. Oh, by the way,
Oh, it's the next day?
today. Today is the next
Well,
day.
because my software, that astrology,
Yeah.
had it as yesterday.
For what?
Ekadashi.
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 Yeah.
It was yesterday.
Yeah, but that wasn't suitable for fasting. Today is the actual day when you're supposed to fast from grains and beans.
I know, that's hard.
Well, we do what we can. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mr. Pad, Paramahansa Buddhacharya Ashtotter Shri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paritikacharya Ashtotar Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavini ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 On this 31st day of October 2017 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are beginning chapter 9, entitled The Most Confidential Knowledge. Text number 1, page 373. Shri Bhagavano Vacha Idam Tude Guyatamam Pravakshyam Yanasuyave Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam Yajnatva Mokshase Shubhat. Shri Bhagavano Vacha Idam Tute Guyatamam Pravakshyam Yanasuyave Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam Yajnatva Mokshase Shubhat. Shri Bhagavano Vacha Idam Tute Guyatamam Pravakshyam Yanasuyave Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam Yajnatva Mokshase Shubhat. Shri Bhagavano Vacha Idam Tute Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam Yajnatva Mokshase Shubhat. Word by word meanings. Shri Bhagavano Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Idam, this too, but te, unto you, Guyatamam, the most confidential, Pravakshyami, I am speaking, Anasuyave, to the non-envious, Jnanam, knowledge, Vijnana, realized knowledge, Sahitam, with yet which, Gyatva, knowing, Mokshase, you will be released, Ashubhat, from this miserable material existence. Page 373. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. Purport. As a devotee hears more and more about the Supreme Lord, he becomes enlightened. This hearing process is recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed amongst devotees. This cannot be achieved by the association of mental speculators or academic scholars, for it is realized knowledge. The devotees are constantly engaged in the Supreme Lord's service. The Lord understands the mentality and sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of devotees. Discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement towards spiritual realization. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes in this ninth chapter matters more confidential than any he has already disclosed. The very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter, is more or less an introduction to the rest of the book. And in the second and third chapters, the spiritual knowledge described is called confidential. Topics discussed in the 7th and 8th chapters are specifically related to devotional service, and because they bring enlightenment in Krishna consciousness, they are called more confidential. But the matters which are described in the 9th chapter deal with unalloyed, pure devotion. Therefore, this is called the most confidential. One who is situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna is naturally transcendental. He therefore has no material pangs, although he is in the material world. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that although one who has a sincere desire to render loving service to the Supreme Lord is situated in the conditional state of material existence, he is to be considered liberated. Similarly, we shall find in the Bhagavad Gita 10th chapter that anyone who is engaged in that way is a liberated person. Now, this first verse has specific significance. The words idam jnanam, this knowledge, refer to pure devotional service, which consists of 9 different activities: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshipping, praying, obeying, maintaining friendship, and surrendering everything. By the practice of these 9 elements of devotional service, one is elevated to spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness. When one's heart is thus cleared of material contamination, one can understand this science of Krishna. Simply to understand that a living entity is not material is not sufficient. That may be the beginning of spiritual realization, but one should recognize the difference between activities of the body and the spiritual activities of one who understands that he is not the body. In the 7th chapter, we have already discussed the opulent potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his different energies, the inferior and superior natures, and all this material manifestation. Now, in chapter 9, the glories of the Lord will be delineated. Actually, that's been fixed. Will be further delineated. The Sanskrit word anasuyave in this verse is also very significant. Generally, the commentators, even if they are highly scholarly, are all envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most erudite scholars write on the Bhagavad Gita very inaccurately. Because they are envious of Krishna, their commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain the Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. So such commentaries should be very carefully avoided. For one who understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very beneficial. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, this is said to be the most confidential knowledge. What is confidential about it? Well, I'll give it away right away. The most confidential knowledge is spoken at the end of this chapter, where Krishna says, Man mana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji nam namaskuru mame vasati yukparvam mana mat parayana. Think of me, put your mind on me, become my devotee, offer your humble obeisances to me and worship me. Thus linked to me, you will certainly come to me. Now, at the end of of Krishna's teachings, in the 18th chapter, he repeats this verse, basically, almost word by word. And before he repeats the verse, he says, now I'm going to describe to you again the most confidential knowledge. Listen with great attention. And he says, Man manabhava madbhakto. But the second line is a little different. He says, Mame vajasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me. You will come to me, I promise you, and I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. In this chapter, you will come to me because you're linked to me in yoga. But then by the time the 18th chapter rolls around, it's a more intimate relationship. And the very next verse is kind of the foundational essence of the whole thing. Sarva dharma parityaja mame kam sharanam vraja aham tvam sabapapebhyo mokshayasami mashaja. Just give up all dharmas, or so-called dharmas. Surrender unto me. I will protect you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So those two verses together, 1865 and 1866, comprise the most confidential knowledge. Now, this chapter will proceed and it will describe why it's the most confidential. And it's kind of, after all of the amazing knowledge of how the world is created, how the energies are going on, what our position is, where the super soul is situated in everyone's heart, and how the three modes of material nature are working, and all of this knowledge which is important for us to have, it all boils down to a very simple thing. And this is why it is said that Krishna consciousness is for everybody. Even the children can take part. On the record, Prabhupada says even the dogs can take part. They can also chant Hare Krishna. It comes down to a heart thing. It's really, if you're ready to be Krishna's friend and you're ready to serve Krishna in love, then don't worry about any of the philosophy. That's the essence of the whole thing. All of the philosophy, the technicalities, the understanding, this is meant to instill faith in us that Krishna is really God, He's all pervasive, He's all powerful, and He's also a person, and we have a relationship with Him. And on the basis of that faith, we then have to act. And the action is the practices of Krishna consciousness, beginning with hearing and chanting. Here, Krishna, Prabhupada mentions that, I think, the 9 processes, right? The 9 processes of devotional service. So these are very practical. Hearing about Krishna, chanting about Krishna, remembering Him, serving Him in so many ways, worshipping Him in the temple, praying to Him, obeying means becoming His servant, dasyam, and sakyam, becoming His friend, and surrendering everything. So when you contemplate and you think about the lives of the devotees in Vrindavan, in Goloka Vrindavan, they're not great philosophers. You have every living entity there, the birds, the trees, the cows, the deer. They're all great devotees. They're far beyond the greatest meditating yogis in the Himalayas and living hundreds of years. Far beyond that. And they have one consciousness, basically, and that's they just love Krishna. They love Him. And then when you're separated from Him, it's the greatest pain, and they're just counting the moments and the seconds when He'll come back and into the forest, or when the gopis are counting when He'll come back to the village. And it's just, that's their whole life. And the varieties of ways in which they exchange love is the substance of what's going on in the spiritual world. So how to get from this point to that point, that's the process of devotional service. Now it begins with, as Krishna is saying here, it's very confidential, meaning that most people can't understand it. They can't understand how we're living in an existence that ultimately doesn't make any sense. There's no point to it. It's a lot of, what did Shakespeare say? He says a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing, or something like that. In other words, there's a whole lot of noise, and there's a whole lot of energy put into it. But in the end, what happens? We die, we go on to another. Everything that we think about and we think is so important in this life is finished. And we go on to another existence, maybe human beings if we're halfway pious, and to start all over again. Some family, who knows where, middle of Indonesia. A whole new language, a whole new set of parents, a whole new set of things that we think are really, really important. Think about it. That's really, one of the basic teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, is that all the material world is this great phantasmagoria that ultimately doesn't really mean anything, because it's temporary and it just winds up and it goes into the body of Mahavishnu for billions of years. How could it possibly mean anything? When you get older, there's certain advantages. There's many disadvantages, but there's some advantages. You can look back on your whole life and, there's so many things. I mean, when I was in 8th grade, the very important things. I was, against the war, even the war was starting then. War in Vietnam. I was a resistor. I think I refused to say the Pledge of Allegiance, just like these guys who Yeah, even in 8th grade, it caused a big fuss, you know. I mean, that was really important stuff, you know. Then what happened? That was a long time ago. 55 years ago, and now. Okay, so what does it mean? You look at the newspaper, the newspaper that I used to read, the newspaper every day, and heartbreaking. So in some other place in the middle of France, they're reading the newspaper, and their affairs are really important to them. The stuff what's going on in New York is not so important to them. So the most confidential knowledge is that we're eternal servants of Krishna, we're spiritual beings, and that our success in life is establishing that relationship and living in that relationship and not coming back again. The last chapter of that little Coming Back book, there's a nice book that was written actually mostly by devotees. And the last chapter written by Mukunda Maharaj is Don't Come Back. That's the whole punchline. So jnana and vijnana. The idea is that knowledge is great, but better than that is realized knowledge. We can know so much about the soul, but when we really realize that we are the soul and we act on that basis, that's a higher platform. So jnana is meant to mature into vijnana, and that's why he says jnana vijnana sahitam. And if you know this, if we actually understand it, which means we live it, then you become liberated from everything that's ashubhat, which means miserable material existence. So this liberation, now just to clear it up, I think it's mentioned in one of our previous purports, that moksha, or mukti, liberation, consists of giving up all of these other bodies that we've had. This one that we had, and the many bodies we had in this lifetime. So the definition is muktir hitva anyata rupam swarupeni vivastati. This concept of swarup means the actual form of the soul. That's our eternal form. That's been covered since time immemorial by our various material bodies that are reflective of the particular variety of our illusion that we happen to be in, and what mode of nature we're in. We've had uncounted bodies, different forms, different species. They aren't really us, but although we think they are temporarily for some time, and then losing that at the time of death is a great trauma because our whole world caves in, and now what? Well, now you get another form So all of those different forms, when you give them all up, no longer involved, and you are situated in your swarup, your eternal form, just suitable to serve Krishna, that's called mukti. Not something just merging into the body of the Lord or merging into the white light. That's not real mukti. That's pseudo-mukti. But we're after real mukti. Our motive is not to be liberated ultimately from this world, although that can be a preliminary motive. Our motive is to be reunited with Krishna, and along with that comes liberation from all the suffering. So that's all contained within this verse. Very nice verse. So, let's see. So he gives us the intelligence. This is like an echo from the next verse, the next chapter. In the next chapter we find, we don't call it the Chaturshloki Bhagavad Gita. That phrase is reserved for the Bhagavatam. There's a Chaturshloki Bhagavatam, 4 essential verses that the whole Bhagavatam was expanded from. But there are 4 verses beginning in 10, 11, and 10, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And 10:10 is what Prabhupada is referring to here in this first paragraph of the purport. That Krishna gives one the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of devotees. So there it says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamapiyantite. That for those who are serving me with love, I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. So Krishna was in our heart. He also wants us to come back to him. He's been overseeing and sanctioning our activities in the material sphere for who knows how long. But what he really wants is that we'll turn to him and become connected to him and come closer to him. So naturally, if we start to make a little effort in that direction, he gives us more intelligence. Yes, do it, do this way, that way. So that's the great advantage of the bhaktas over any other kind of yogi. There's all kinds of yogis. I mean, most people are, vast majority are materialists. But of those who are practicing some kind of yoga for elevation, it can be karma yoga, it can be jnana yoga, it can be dhyana yoga, ashtanga yoga, or it can be bhakti yoga. The great advantage of the bhakti yoga is that they have Krishna on their side. Krishna is helping us to practice. The others, Krishna is not so anxious that the siddhi yogis will attain their eight cities and do this and that. He's only moved by love and devotion. And that's the basic principle of the bhakti yogis. So naturally he's going to help us. And he helps us even without our asking. He comes himself, he speaks the Bhagavad Gita, he sends his representative, he leaves, he comes as his holy name. That's a great advantage that we have. But the key is to have some faith, to come in touch with those who have the faith, and be able to establish enough faith to begin the practice. As soon as the practice is started, Krishna helps from within. And we have all these advantages if we're ready to take advantage of them. All right, so should we go on? This next verse is really important. And there's a really nice long purport, as I mentioned yesterday. It's an essay in and of itself. It was published, I believe, separately in I think one of Prabhupada's publications, maybe Back to Godhead. And so you'll see, as it has a nice form to it and it has a wonderful ending to it. Text 2. Rajavindya Rajaguyam Pavitram idam uttamam Pratyakshaavagamam dharmyam Susukam kartam abhyayam. This knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting, and it is joyfully performed. Purport. This chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is called the King of Education because it is the essence of all doctrines and philosophies explained before. And before includes, as you'll see, more than just what's been explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Among the principal philosophers in India are Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Yagyavalkya, Shandilya, and Vaishvanara. And finally there is Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra. So there is no dearth of knowledge in the field of philosophy or transcendental knowledge. Now the Lord says that this 9th chapter is the king of all such knowledge, and the essence of all knowledge that can be derived from the study of the Vedas and different kinds of philosophy. It is the most confidential because confidential or transcendental knowledge involves understanding the difference between the soul and the body, and the king of all confidential knowledge culminates in devotional service. Generally, people are not educated in this confidential knowledge. They are educated in external knowledge. As far as ordinary education is concerned, people are involved with so many departments: politics, sociology, physics, chemistry, mathematics, astronomy, engineering, etc. There are so many departments of knowledge all over the world and many huge universities. But there is, unfortunately, no university or educational institution where the science of the spirit soul is instructed. Yet the soul is the most important part of the body. Without the presence of the soul, the body has no value. Still, people are placing great stress on the bodily necessities of life, not caring for the vital soul. Excuse me. The Bhagavad Gita, especially from the 2nd chapter on, stresses the importance of the soul. In the very beginning, the Lord says that this body is perishable and that the soul is not perishable. Antavamda hime deha nityasyokta sharirinaha. That is a confidential part of knowledge, simply knowing that the spirit soul is different from this body and that its nature is immutable, indestructible, and eternal. But that gives no positive information about the soul. Sometimes people are under the impression that the soul is different from the body and that when the body is finished or one is liberated from the body, the soul remains in a void and becomes impersonal. But actually that is not the fact. How can the soul, which is so active within this body, be inactive after being liberated from the body? If it is always active. If it is eternal, then it is eternally active, and its activities in the spiritual kingdom are the most confidential part of spiritual knowledge. These activities of the spirit soul are therefore indicated here as constituting the king of all knowledge, the most confidential part of all knowledge. This knowledge is the purest form of all activities, as explained in the Vedic literature. In the Padma Purana, man's sinful activities have been analyzed and are shown to be the results of sin after sin. Those who are engaged in fruitive activities are entangled in different stages and forms of sinful reactions. For instance, when the seed of a particular tree is sown, the tree does not appear immediately to grow. It takes some time. It is first a small sprouting plant, then it assumes the form of a tree, then it flowers and bears fruit, and when it is complete, the flowers and fruits are enjoyed by persons who have sown the seed of the tree. Similarly, a man performs a sinful act, and like a seed, it takes time to fructify. There are different stages. The sinful action may have already stopped within the individual, but the results or the fruit of that sinful action are still to be enjoyed, or rather, experienced. There are sins which are still in the form of a seed, and there are others which are already fructified and are giving us fruit, which we are experiencing as distress and pain. These little edits have been made already in later editions of this book. As explained in the 28th verse of the 7th chapter, a person who has completely ended the reactions of all sinful activities and who is fully engaged in pious activities, being freed from the duality of this material world, becomes engaged in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In other words, those who are actually engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord are already freed from all reactions. This statement is confirmed in the Padma Purana. Aprarabdha palam papam kutam bijam palonmukam kramenaiva pliyeta Vishnu bhakti vatatmanam. For those who are engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all sinful reactions, whether fructified in the stock or in the form of a seed, gradually vanish. Therefore, the purifying potency of devotional service is very strong, and it is called Pavitram Uttamam, the purest. Uttama means transcendental. Tamas means this material world or darkness, and Uttama means that which is transcendental to material activities. Devotional activities are never to be considered material, although sometimes it appears that devotees are engaged just like ordinary men. One who can see and is familiar with devotional service will know that they are not material activities. They are all spiritual and devotional, uncontaminated by the material modes of nature. It is said that the execution of devotional service is so perfect that one can perceive the results directly. This direct result is actually perceived, and we have practical experience that any person who is chanting the holy names of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, in course of chanting without offense, feels some transcendental pleasure and very quickly becomes purified of all material contamination. This is actually seen. Furthermore, if one engages not only in hearing but in trying to broadcast the message of devotional activities as well, or if he engages himself in helping the missionary activities of Krishna consciousness, he gradually feels spiritual progress. This advancement in spiritual life does not depend on any kind of previous education or qualification. The method itself is so pure that by simply engaging in it, one becomes pure. In the Vedanta Sutra, this is also described in the following words: Prakashascha kamam yabhyasat. Devotional service is so potent that simply by engaging in the activities of devotional service, one becomes enlightened without a doubt. A practical example of this can be seen in the previous life of Narada, who in that life happened to be the son of a maidservant. He had no education, nor was he born into a high family. But when his mother was engaging in serving great devotees, Narada also became engaged, and sometimes, in the absence of his mother, he would serve the great devotees himself. Narada personally says, Uttishtalepan anumodito dvijay sakrit smabunje tadapastakil bishaha evam pravittasya vishuddha chetasas tadharma evatmaruchi pajayate. In this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.25, Narada describes his previous life to his disciple Vyasadeva. He says that while engaged as a boy servant for those purified devotees during the 4 months of their stay, he was intimately associating with them. Sometimes those sages left remnants of food on their dishes, and the boy who would wash their dishes wanted to taste the remnants. So he asked the great devotees for their permission, and when they gave it, Narada ate those remnants and consequently became freed from all sinful reactions. As he went on eating, he gradually became as pure-hearted as the sages. The great devotees relished the taste of unceasing devotional service to the Lord by hearing and chanting, and Narada gradually developed the same taste. Narada says further, Tattvam vaham Krishna katapagayatam anugrahena shrinavam manoharaha tasradhayame nupadam visrinvata priyashabhasyangamamababadhuchihi. By associating with the sages, Narada got the taste for hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, and he developed a great desire for devotional service. Therefore, as described in the Vedanta Sutra, Prakashascha karman yabhyasat. If one is engaged simply in the acts of devotional service, everything is revealed to him automatically, and he can understand. This is called pratyaksha, directly perceived. The word dharmyam means the path of religion. Narada was actually a son of a maidservant. He had no opportunity to go to school. He was simply assisting his mother, and fortunately his mother rendered some service to the devotees. The child Narada also got the opportunity, and simply by association achieved the highest goal of all religion. The highest goal of all religion is devotional service, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam. Savai pungsam parodharmo yato bhaktir anhokshaje. Which means the supreme dharma is that which gives rise to devotional service to the transcendent Lord. Religious people generally do not know that the highest perfection of religion is the attainment of devotional service. As we have already discussed in regard to the last verse of chapter 8, Vedeshu Yaggeshu Tapaksu Chaiva, generally Vedic knowledge is required for self-realization. But here, although Narada never went to the school of the spiritual master and was not educated in the Vedic principles, he acquired the highest results of Vedic study. This process is so potent that even without performing the religious process regularly, one can be raised to the highest perfection. How is this possible? This is also confirmed in the Vedic literature. Acharyavan Purusho Veda. One who is in association with great acharyas, even if he is not educated or has never studied the Vedas, can become familiar with all the knowledge necessary for realization. The process of devotional service is a very happy one, susukam. Why? Devotional service consists of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. So one can simply hear the chanting of the glories of the Lord or can attend philosophical lectures on transcendental knowledge given by authorized acharyas. Simply by sitting, one can learn. Then one can eat the remnants of the food offered to God, nice palatable dishes. In every state, devotional service is joyful. One can execute devotional service even in the most poverty-stricken condition. The Lord says, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam. He is ready to accept from the devotee any kind of offering, never mind what, even a leaf, a flower, a big bit of fruit, or a little water, which are all available in every part of the world, can be offered by any person, regardless of social position, and will be accepted if offered with love. There are many instances in history. Simply by tasting the tulsi leaves offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, great sages like Sanat Kumara became great devotees. Therefore, the devotional process is very nice and it can be executed in a happy mood. God accepts only the love with which things are offered to him. It is said that this devotional service is eternally existing. Prabhupada is going through this verse word by word, by the way. He's explaining each word. The last word in the verse is avyayam, which means eternally existing. So that means we're near the end of the purport. It is said here that this devotional service is eternally existing. It is not as the Mayavadi philosophers claim, although they sometimes take to so-called devotional service. Their idea is that as long as they are not liberated, they will continue their devotional service, but at the end, when they become liberated, they will, quote, become one with God. Such temporary, time-serving devotional service is not accepted as pure devotional service. Actual devotional service continues even after liberation. When the devotee goes to the spiritual planet in the kingdom of God, he is also engaged there in serving the Supreme Lord. He does not try to become one with the Supreme Lord. As will be seen in the Bhagavad Gita, actual devotional service begins after liberation. After one is liberated, when one is situated in the Brahman position, Brahmabhuta, one's devotional service begins. Samak sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. By executing devotional service, one can understand the Supreme Lord. No one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by executing karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, or any other yoga independently. By these yogic methods, one may make a little progress toward bhakti yoga, but without coming to the stage of devotional service, one cannot understand what is the personality of Godhead. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is also confirmed that when one becomes purified by executing the process of devotional service, especially by hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita from realized souls, then he can understand the science of Krishna or the science of God. Evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha. When one's heart is cleared of all nonsense, then one can understand what God is. Thus, the process of devotional service of Krishna consciousness is the king of all education and the king of all confidential knowledge. It is the purest form of religion, and it can be executed joyfully without difficulty. Therefore, one should adopt it. Hare Krishna. So, what a great experience reading this purport together. It's a full lesson. We could probably spend several days on this purport. So the king of knowledge, and Prabhupada explains, there's so much knowledge out there. There's certainly plenty of material knowledge, but here Prabhupada, he gives a list of great philosophers, Indian philosophers, Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Yajnavalkya, Shandilya, and Vaishvanara. I don't know their specific philosophies. This Kapila must be the Kapila Muni that we're studying in the Bhagavatam. I don't think it's talking about the atheist Kapila here. But each of them has their perspective. But the essence of all of them, the most confidential of all, is taught by Vyasadeva. And Vyasadev's book here is the Bhagavad Gita. This is part of his book called the Mahabharata. And Vedanta Sutra. So this 9th chapter is the king of all such knowledge. Because Krishna says in the 15th chapter, he says, Sarvasya chaham ridisam nivishto mattak smriti jnanam apohanancha. I am in everyone's heart, and from me come knowledge and remembrance and forgetfulness also. Vedaischa sarva ahameva vejo vedanta krit veda vedeva chaham. Of all the Vedas, Vedaischa sarva ahameva vejo, I am to be known. So the goal is not just that knowledge for knowledge's sake, but there's a goal in accumulating knowledge, in learning knowledge. We have to have some end. And here Krishna says the end of it all is to understand me. I am the writer of the Vedanta. Vedavyasa is said to be an incarnation of Krishna also. So he wrote the Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Krit, Vedavid, Eva Chaham. And I am the knower of the Vedas. So any so-called Vedic knowledge that doesn't lead to Krishna consciousness is leading you astray. And indeed, in the first canto of Bhagavatam, we'll find how Vyasadeva comes down to Narada. Narada comes down to Vyasadeva, his disciple, and he gets on his case. He says, you wrote all these other books, the other Puranas, the Mahabharata, the Vedanta Sutra, the Upanishads, but you didn't glorify Krishna enough. And this is why you're unsatisfied. Now you have to write a book that wholly and solely deals with the absolute truth. Krishna, his service, his devotees, like that. And so now he sits in meditation, and he meditates on Krishna, and he has a revelation, and he writes the Bhagavatam for that. So, the Bhagavad Gita gives the same philosophy in capsule form as given in the Bhagavatam.
This Narada that you're talking about?
Narada Muni.
Wow.
Yeah.
Around what time did he write this Bhagavatam?
No, Narada didn't write the Bhagavatam. His disciple Vyasadeva did. But here in this purport, Prabhupada gives a nice summary of how he became Narada. You know, in his previous birth, before he was Narada, he was just a little boy, the son of a maidservant. Simple, he wasn't a great scholar or anything. But he had the great advantage of during the rainy season, the Chaturmasya. So it becomes too rainy, and you can't travel. So the normal peripatetic travelers, the munis and devotees, they have to stay in one spot. So they picked this pious lady's house to stay. So for 4 months, they're staying there and talking about Krishna, glorifying Krishna. And the mother, as well as Narada, are benefiting from hearing. And then he took the prasadam. There's very great, very potency in the remnants of great devotees. And the water that washes their feet and the dust, foot dust, these things are said to be extremely potent, if you can find it. There's a secret in this temple, you know. There's a secret treasure in this temple room. You see behind me, every day we perform arati to Prabhupada, Guru Puja. And you notice there's a little rolled up little mat over there. And that mat has a lot of foot dust of the devotees. Don't be afraid to take a little bit of that, put it on your head, and you'll see it. It's very, very potent. This is an amazing mat. I'm the one who provides the mat. And it's been there for a year, almost. Usually these mats wear out, but this particular mat, I have more at home. It's probably last a little bit, you know. So it's got a lot of foot dust. And just to let you know.
I don't see a mat. I don't see it.
The little rolled up. You see it? You can't see it. Yeah, yeah. We unroll it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought Vasudev was an incarnation.
There's Vasudev, and then there's Vyasadeva. Pronunciation is very important. Vyasadeva, Srila Vyasadeva. He's known as Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas. Dvaipayana, I think, because he was born on an island. But anyway, we call him generally Vyasadeva or Srila Vyasadeva. He actually wrote the Bhagavatam and all this other. He wrote the Mahabharata, of which is Bhagavad Gita. He's a great sage. So great that he's actually understood to be an incarnation of Krishna.
It's my understanding there's many Vyasadevas.
They appear each, you know, during I think the Dwapara and Kali Yugas, you know, as they come around. So there's always someone who's doing that, you know. Vyas really means to divide. The Veda came out as one when it was expressed by Krishna into the heart of Brahma. You know, the Vedas is just one. Veda means knowledge. But when the Vyasadeva saw the Kali Yuga coming, he realized, oh my God, they're not, because the way that this knowledge is transmitted is from guru to disciple. You hear it and you know it. You know, everyone could remember. I mean, Sutta Goswami, who speaks, the Bhagavatam is like a conversation within conversation within conversation. So the main conversation we're hearing really is you have Shukadev relating to Pariksit, but Sutta was in the assembly, heard it, memorized all the verses, and then he repeated it to the sages at Naimisharanya. Can you imagine how clear one's mind has to be like that to remember all those verses? You know, we have trouble remembering a few verses, you know, after drilling and drilling and drilling. So, but when Kali Yuga comes out, we're too disturbed. You know, we can't remember anything. So we need to have everything written down, and that's what Vyas did. He divided the Vedas into 4. That's how we get the Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Veda. And then he also wrote the Itihasa. Itihasa are histories like the Mahabharata. He didn't write the Ramayana. That's another history that was written by Valmiki. But that's recognized as a Vedic literature. So all of these literatures, Upanishads, part of the Vedas, and Vedanta Sutra, and then 18 Puranas for different modes of nature, you know. But none of that dealt wholly and solely with devotional service. Even in the Mahabharata, you find so many extraneous stories, even from the, you know, in addition to the main plot, if you will, of the Pandavas and the battle, you know, brewing for the, culminating in the Kurukshetra war. There's so much other stuff in there. And in the Vedas, you'll find the Karma Kanda section, which deals with elaborate sacrifices for getting better birth in this world or even going to the heavenly planets. And Krishna, right in the 2nd chapter, he says, Yamimam pushpita vacha babadantya vipashchada vedavara ratapata nanyadaste divarana kamatmana swarga para janma karma palapadam kriya vishesha baholam bhogaishrayigatim pati. He says that those who don't know, who are vedavara rata, this kind of idiom, this word rata is used for the so-called knowers of the Vedas. They say that the flowery words of the Karma Kanda section, which advertise, you know, Indraloka and all these Siddhaloka to go to higher planets, they say that's all there is. That's the main part of the Vedas. That's what it's all about. And to that end, they perform elaborate sacrifices for elevation to the heavenly planets. Bhoga Aishwarya Katim Bhati. They're looking for Bhoga and Aishwarya. means material enjoyment and the wealth to enjoy it. And then the very next verse he says, Bhogaishraya prasaktanam taya parita chetasam vyavasayatmaka buddhi samadho navadhiyate. That those who are too enamored of bhoga and aishraya, of enjoyment and money, wealth of all kinds, they cannot get the firm determination to perform devotional service. Because why do I want to get out of this world if I'm putting so much energy to try to enjoy in this world? You see? So to really be able to chant, from the bottom of your heart, you have to be willing to give up attachments to this world more and more. Vairagya is a very important aspect. We were just hearing this morning this wonderful prayer from Queen Kunti. And I just realized, I just reread, we have this great scene of Queen Kunti offering prayers to Krishna before he goes back to Dwarka after the battle of Kurukshetra. Yudhishthira has been enthroned as the king. They performed all these rites for all of the dead relatives. It's a very moving scene in the first canto. And then Kunti offers her prayers in the 8th chapter of the first canto. But also present there are her 5 sons, the Pandavas, and Draupadi. They're also standing silently as Kunti offers prayers. And at the end of those prayers, she has this amazing thing. She says, "My dear Lord, you're going now, and I realize you're about to wind up your pastimes, in this earth. So please cut off my affection from my relatives, including the Pandavas and who are standing there." She's saying now this, motherly affection I have, I want everything to be directed to you. Tvai me ananya vishaya mati madhupate sakrit. O Madhava, please ever fill my mind with thoughts of thee, not any other kind. As Ganges torrent flows into the sea, let all my love flow constantly to thee. This is her prayer, near the end of her prayers. And the one before that says, Sneha pasham imam chindi. May the ropes, because he says the ropes of attraction, affection for the Pandavas and my other relatives, please cut them, so that all of that could be directed to you. Because all of this, which really nourishes like normal family life in this world, that will also bring us back. That also binds us to this world. So she's teaching us. But in those prayers, she talks about the dangers of being too much enamored with material knowledge, material wealth, even material beauty, what to speak of good birth. If you're too much enamored of those things, you can chant Hare Krishna, but you can't chant from the heart. Janmaishraya Shuta Shribya Edamana Madak Puman Naiva Hattibidatam Tvai Vai Tvama Kinchana Gocharam. You are the property of the propertyless, those who don't claim anything in this world, but you. That's who you really recognize. And she says, those who are too much, here's the translation, it says, my dear Lord, your Lordship is easily approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted, because those who are too much enamored of good birth and wealth and education and personal beauty cannot call upon you with deep feeling. They can call upon you, but they have many other things that they're also taking shelter of. That's the problem. So that's why you find in the devotees of Lord Chaitanya, beginning with the 6 Goswamis, extreme examples of renunciation, but also extreme examples of the highest bliss that they were able to experience. Rupa and Sanatan, it is a Tyakravatuna Mashesha Mandalapati Sheni Sadat Tuchavat Bhutva Dina Ganeshako Kadunaya Kaupina Kantashrito. That 3 of them, the Raghunath, Das Goswami, and Sanatan Goswami, Rupa Goswami, they were all extremely wealthy. And in the case of Rupa and Sanatan, they were in the government. They weren't happy to be in the government, but they were forced to be in the government of the Muslim ruler. And they were very learned. They knew Arabic and they knew Sanskrit and so many languages, Bengali, of course. But when they surrendered to Lord Chaitanya and left, Rupa, they cashed out. Rupa Goswami had a whole boatload of gold that he liquidated everything. He gave half of it to his relatives, quarter of it. Or maybe half of it to the Brahmins and devotees, a quarter of it to his relatives, and a quarter he kept for emergencies, which he needed. His brother was arrested because the Nawab wouldn't hear of him quitting. He said, "I need you to run the country while I go out on my military campaigns." So he arrested him. So Rupa went off to Vrindavan and left these vast amount of wealth with an honest grocer. Can you imagine? Not in a bank, but an honest grocer. And then when Sanatan needed to get out, he was able to bribe the jailer to let him out, and he escaped. So what did they do when they went to Vrindavan? Vrindavan was not built up; it was just like a forest, an empty forest at that time. You know, but it was the place where Krishna had enjoyed his pastime. So what part of their job, part of their assignment, was to excavate those places to find out from wherever, by their own realization, from the sages who were living there, where the pastime places were. That's why today you can go around and you say, oh, this is where Monkshi Bhat is, this is where Krishna played the flute to attract the gopis, here's where he killed this demon, and so forth. So, but what did they have? They lived the most austere lives. So this verse describes, this is written by Srinivasacharya, one of the disciples of the six Goswamis. So he says, Tyaktva Turnam Ashesha Mandalapati. Ashesha Mandalapati means endless circles of influence and opulence. Mandalapati, Shreni, Sadat Tuchavat. They gave it up, they renounced it as very insignificant, because they knew the real treasure that they were now possessing, and that was love of God. So they gave it all up, and from the richest they became the poorest you could possibly be. Even poorer than these poor guys walking on the street, you know. They took on the rejected clothes. They didn't have a place of residence. They lived under a tree. To get food, they went to Madhukari, different begging here and there, and sometimes they didn't even do that. And they hardly even slept. But they wrote the most wonderful literatures, treasure. You know, Stavamala, and Bhagavad Das was writing his Stavavali, this poems, Radha Krishna. So the rest of the verse, the third verse, line says, okay, they came from the richest to the poorest. For our benefit, Bhutva Dina Ganeshika means becoming the leaders and the saviors of the Dinas. Dina means different things, but it means the most wretched of the earth, those who are poor, really poor, us. To write the literatures, which is what the foundation of this movement is. They took the time and the trouble to do that. So for our sake, they became mendicants and great devotees. And what were they experiencing? What were they actually feeling? Gopi bhava rasam tabdalhavi kalola magno moho. Again and again, they're diving in an ocean filled with the waves of the most intimate, intense, blissful service of Krishna in the mood of the gopis. Gopi bhava rasam ratabdalahari. Nectarian mellows of the gopi bhava. So they gave up all material stuff, but they became the wealthiest they could possibly be. So this is the what we have to try to emulate. Oh my goodness. I went overtime. That always happens when I fast. I become too talkative. Okay, so we'll resume tomorrow. Will you be here tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did promise.
You did?
I did promise.
All right. All glories to the Prabhupada. We'll read text 3 tomorrow. Yeah, this chapter is essential. It's a very important chapter. Vairagya means detachment, dispassion. Vaibhava?
Well, Vaibhava really means power. It's like Vibhu is the opulence. You know, one of Krishna's names is Vibhu. Yeah, dispassion. And it goes with knowledge. When knowledge is meant to breed dispassion, knowledge of this material world. I can give an example, maybe after Arti, which is going to happen 14 minutes late. Oh my God. Nobody warned me. Uh-oh. Will you be here tomorrow? Great, run. Yeah, you and me, let's do the chair. Okay. Saswami Prabhupada ki jai. ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Mr. Paramahamsa Pradikacharya Ashtotra Krishna Divine Grace. Everybody sit in humble throat for the Thakur ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki jai. Namacharya Srila Thakur ki jai. Prem Chithoshi Krishna Chaitanya Govinda Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaur Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopal Vinaya Giri Gopala Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Jagadish Maya Pradhan Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ganga Mahi Ki Jai Yamuna Mahi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Shri Harinam Kirtan Ki Jai Chaitanya Bhakti Ki Jai Holy Mother Karti ki jai, jai. All glory to the Son of the Lord. All glory to the Son of the Lord. All glory to the Son of the Lord. All glory to Guru and Guru. Namaste, 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 Namaste. Bhushan, what's up? You looking for somebody to keep those to?
I heard.
I can't do it. I can't do it, man. Can you put the mic back there? You could.
I heard beautiful. And then after that I can hear the voice of my
I wish I could do that.
I know.
You have to talk to a power mom on it.
Putting on my देखो प्रसाद खाओ ठीक हो जाओगे कहाँ नहीं थे क्या यहाँ पे मैंने सुना आप बोल रहे थे ना कि वो हो रहे हैं
Prashad. I'm leaving in a minute. Anyone want some?
You
Get
go
it
ahead.
now.
ये लो
What would you like?
ले मैसेज अर्जुन है पहले मैंने ये सोचा अर्जुन है
Three in a cup.
Oh, you went to work today, I can tell. Working hard. ये लो ये लो
Come on, David. Take some of this nice prodigy. Why not?
तो कैसा चल रहा है
Scoop of that.
Can you hear me?
Scoop of that. You want to do hands?
Oh wow. In a half one
First Tuesday, only Tuesday.
Tomorrow. Not eating anything today. Let me get you.
But what if we have like an available program for someone to come out?
It would be great, but we need someone to do it.
What about Friday evenings and stuff? What about Thursday? आप बताइए
What
मैं एक ही बार आया
It's a whole course.
Gita next to devotion.
Friday
Yeah, Balaram has trained. He was trained in that. That's the grammar too. But Balaram always wanted to teach, but he never set up. It was like real helpful.
Saturday night was the personal connection with so I prefer like Shan.
It should be left out a little bit because
Depends. कभी time
these are like hard to block. So I leave them out.
Yeah, maybe
Okay, I'll leave them out. Yeah.
And the cardboard, you write it much quicker.
Or keep them in the cardboard.
yeah.